Hey kids, how are ya? I've missed you. I hope you're all out there thriving in this beautiful world that we live in. I appreciate those of you who reached out to see where the next episode was, and I apologize for not getting it out sooner. I caught a flu of some sorts a couple of weeks ago, and I lost my voice. And that is the reason you are just now getting the next installment. I probably still sound like a bit of a toad, so bear with me. I will do my best. But I hope in the wake of recent happenings in our country over the last few weeks that you woke up today with a sound mind and a sense of well-being. I hope that logic rises above the hubbub of the confusion that surrounds all of us. That is my wish to all of you. But how sure are you of the things that we all talk about? I personally speak with authority as if I do know what I'm talking about most of the time. But how sure am I, really? Is it more confidence than knowing? Is it that I have the ability to convince the person that's listening? Or is it that I actually know? What is it that helps me land on the resolve? Because it's not like I don't study. I do study. I have a lot of time on my hands. It's not because I hear a party regurgitate a narrative and simply believe it, because I cross-reference like nobody's business. I am a seeker of truth, and I hate being lied to. So what is it that keeps me from getting duped? Is it my own life experience that I add to the equation? Is it a feeling? Does my upbringing have anything to do with it? I'm not sure, because as soon as I think I've got it all figured out, more information comes out. I'm not going to lie, most of the time, my observation seems to be what I originally thought. And I trust my gut. I have good instincts, and I've always had them. I just didn't always listen. And when I didn't listen to what my instincts were trying to tell me, I didn't have to do a lot of self-reflection on how I could have possibly missed the mark, because deep down, I knew. But sometimes there are no red flags. And being uncomfortable in a situation doesn't necessarily mean you're on the wrong path. Sometimes it simply means you've stepped out of your comfort zone, and that can help you grow. I always want to be growing because I hate complacency. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. So to claim that I know something for sure, there are a million possibilities that could debunk exactly what I had previously ruled out. So I perpetually inquire. And I especially inquire on topics that I'm still not quite sure about. I preface all of this because today I have some puzzle pieces that I still can't quite put together, and I'd like for you to help me in coming to the conclusion. So I'm going to start at the very beginning, and this story spans decades. So grab yourself a bevy or sneak yourself a snack and meet me right back here after this message on the Proxy Principle.
Introducing Vanity Fair, the band that brings unforgettable performances covering more than 25 music genres from the 1920s to today. With a growing set list and a range of ensembles, they're perfect for corporate events, festivals, weddings, and more. When you want entertainment that stands out, Vanity Fair delivers every time. Their team is dedicated to working with you, offering personalized experiences that match your vision and your budget, and creating a truly memorable event. Ready to book Vanity Fair for your next event? Visit vanityfair-theband.com.
The Proxy Principle.
Welcome to the Proxy Principle with Candi Rands.
The Proxy Principle.
Expect her diving into raw stories of life between gigs, chasing record deals, and brushing shoulders with some really big names. So sit back and enjoy, by proxy anyway. And without further ado, here's your host of the Proxy Principle, Candi Rands.
Did you get yourself a cocktail? I've got a coffee and I'm ready to go. So, without further ado, we're going to go back to the 1980s, my favorite time period. Actually, that's a lie. My favorite time period is now, 'cause I'm here with you. I could probably write an R&B song about it, but I'm not gonna, 'cause I'm gonna tell you this story. It was the fall of 1988, which was one of my favorite years of high school. It was when my parents started to loosen the leash. They wanted me to enjoy my teenage years. They had taken me out of all of my advanced classes that I'd been in since elementary school because I was such a perfectionist and they didn't want me to put so much pressure on myself. I was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities such as choir. I was auditioning for leads in musicals. I was a cheerleader. I was on the homecoming court. You know, all of the things that we thought were so important, yet they were so temporary. And my parents let me pretty much do whatever I asked. I mean, I was a goody two shoes, so they trusted me. I think I had probably been dating for maybe a year, and I told them everything. So there really was no need for me to sneak around or anything like that. I didn't even have a curfew. Well, until I stayed out a little too late one night, but still, they were pretty lenient with me. Did they know that I was making out with every boyfriend I had? Yes, boys, they did. I was pretty open with my parental units, but let me clarify. I was not having sex with anyone, hence more of the goody two shoes part of it. I was just kissing a lot of cute boys. And sometimes I was labeled a tease, but get over yourselves. I was just as horny as the rest of you. I just had a little more restraint because I thought if I actually did go all the way, I was going to go to hell. But no matter what I was doing, there was usually some good music playing in the background. For God's sakes, it was the 80s. It was the best music. I know everybody thinks that about their generation, don't they? But one of my favorite things to do was to go to the mall to buy records. I think I liked buying records more than I liked buying clothes or makeup. I craved it. And probably because I was limited to the amount of pop music that I could listen to growing up. Because the little church lady that I was, you know, that's just how it goes. I was brought up on contemporary Christian music, which wasn't all that bad. But when we got MTV, oh my Lord, it was like Jesus had truly saved my soul. I could not get enough of it. I was glued to that television. And if I couldn't afford to buy a 45 or an album or a CD at Musicland, I would find a friend who already had the music and record the songs on my blank TDK or Maxell cassette tapes. I know, I'm aging myself. However, I know a few of you can relate. But there was this specific time I recall walking into Musicland with barely any money in my pocket, browsing 1988's top artists, one being my idol, Whitney Houston, of whom both albums I already owned. George Michael, Richard Marx, Debbie Gibson, Chicago, they were also some of my other faves. But there was a new sound coming in, and it was referred to as New Jack Swing, otherwise known as pop music usually performed by Black musicians that combined elements of jazz, funk, rap, and rhythm and blues. And the particular artist I'm about to mention was labeled as such. His name, Albert Joseph Brown III, otherwise known as I'll Be Sure. And his debut single was Night and Day, off of his debut album, In Effect Mode. I happened to be scanning through the cassette rack and found his tape. And I was looking at the price and I was like, this can't be right. Because the song was a huge hit and the cassette tape was only $2.99. This wasn't a single, it was the whole album. So I took it to the register and I asked, is the pricing right on this album? Because I don't want to try to pull a fast one. I told you, goody two shoes. The guy looked it up and he said, no, it's actually priced incorrectly, but since that's the price tag that's on it, I have to sell it to you at that price. Yeah, I had $5 in my pocket and I was sold. Now, you're going to start to realize if you don't know me already, it doesn't take much to get me excited. So I was thrilled. Not only did I walk into a bargain, I rushed home with one of my favorite new artists in hand, popped that puppy into my ghetto blaster, and danced. Dance, I said. Anyway, I played that tape until I could play it no mo. I loved it. It was in my bones. Now, we're going to fast forward to the early 2000s. I know you've heard me talk about Michelli's, the oldest Italian restaurant in Los Angeles. I was working there. I was the singing hostess. And at that time, before anyone would clock in for their evening shift, we would grab our employee meal and congregate in a little terrace level of the restaurant. You know, shoot the shit a little while breaking bread together. One of my favorite coworkers, Steve, who ran the cash register and took care of to-go orders, noticed that a certain celebrity was sitting across the restaurant at table 1 with a small entourage. He was wearing a ball cap and sunglasses. Steve says to me, "Candace, you should get up and sing a song." And I was like, "Dude, I just got here. Why?" And he proceeds by saying, "M. Night Shyamalama Ding Dong is sitting at table 1. You never know, if he hears you sing, maybe he'll put you in a movie or get you on a soundtrack." I was like, "Steve, I don't think he's that kind of director." Steve encouraged me by saying, "You never know, you should give it a shot." So I finished my meal and I went directly to the piano to tell Jeff, our accompanist, to play "You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman" by Aretha Franklin. I had heard Christina Aguilera do a rendition of it somewhere, and that's the version I did. When I finished, I picked up a tray that needed to be returned, walked back to the host station, and I had to pass table 1. Lo and behold, the gentleman wearing the sunglasses and ball cap stopped me to compliment me on my song. When I thanked him was when I noticed that it was not M. Night Shyamalan. He continued by telling me that my performance was really soulful and that I had great pitch. And he said, "And you have a really great look." I again said, "Thank you. I really appreciate that." He asked me my name, and I proceeded to tell him my name is Candace. Candace is my real name, by the way, even though all my friends call me Candi. It was a weird dynamic when I moved to LA. I noticed, everybody here would immediately associate Candi with being a stripper. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just had a brand that I was going for in my mind professionally. So, Candace it was. Anyway, he pulled down his shades and he said, "It's nice to meet you. My name is Albie Shore." And it was. I dropped the tray and said, "Oh my God, you are. I am such a huge fan. You have no idea." His entourage laughed. I, on the other hand, was mortified that I dropped that tray. But the embarrassment was fleeting as I picked it up, because I was talking to Albie Shore. He grinned, and he was very polite. He told me that he was starting a new subsidiary record label of Warner Brothers, and he would love to talk with me about signing. My other record deals had fallen through, and in my mind I was like, there is no way that this guy wants to sign me just from hearing the song I just sang. But I said, sure, because that was something I was sure of in that moment. I was sure that I wanted to have a discussion with this man. There was a little bit more small talk before I once again thanked him for stopping me to introduce himself. And I said, "I will let you and your friends enjoy the rest of your meal. Just stop by the host station on your way out." He said, "I'll do that." I was trying to remain calm as I walked to the host station, but inside, I was dancing like Janet Jackson in the Pleasure Principle video, flipping on lights, jumping down stairs, knocking down chairs, and jumping back on them and shit. You might think I'm crazy, but I'm serious when I tell you I had a good feeling about this. And to keep myself contained while waiting was really hard because table 1 was right behind me. And I'll tell you this, he seemed excited too because he didn't wait to leave the restaurant to come talk to me. He got out of the booth and made his way in my direction. He said, "I don't want to scare you or anything, so I'm going to give you my card. You call me anytime. You can reach me at any of these numbers." There was the one printed on the front, and 4 more were handwritten on the back. I said, "Okay, you got it. And here's mine," as I wrote it down and handed it to him while telling him, again, that it was nice meeting him. He went back to his table, and I was still trying to maintain. I had been in the business long enough to know that people flake all the time, so dealing with the emotions of what could come, the possibilities were endless. And when he left the restaurant that night, I couldn't help but think, are all of my dreams that I've been drumming up since I was a kid actually coming true? And I was just learning the game of playing it cool. LA had picked up on a dating habit that came from a little movie called Swingers, where you get a chick's number and you don't call her for several days because you don't want to appear to be too eager. While boys in this town applied that rule to dating, I applied that rule to business. And although I called my parents to tell them the story as soon as my shift ended, I was going to wait a few days to call Al. But the next morning, he called me. I remember that when I answered the phone and heard Al's voice on the other end, I went from hello to a rush of anxiety to focus, Candi, focus. He was wanting to set up a time and place to meet. We decided on meeting at one of Burbank's staple diners in Toluca Lake called Patty's, and we would meet the next morning. I joined Al sitting under a large awning on the patio. We ordered some brekkie, and he said, "I got you a little something," as he proceeded to hand me a gift bag. I opened it, and inside was a hardcover book entitled All You Need to Know About the Music Business. Al told me to familiarize myself with it. He said something along the lines that he wanted me to be able to navigate through this business without getting taken. He was building trust. He was also putting some things on the table, such as basically offering me a deal that day. He said that Christina Aguilera, one of the most successful music artists of that time, was working on her second album, was wanting to do a cover of his hit song, Night and Day, but that he wanted to save it to be my first release. He also said that if I decided to take him up on the offer, that all of my attorney's costs for negotiation would be covered by him. And he said to start looking for an apartment, even though I was already sharing one with a roommate. But he said he wanted me to have my own place as part of the advance. I don't really remember what the reasoning was, but I'm not going to lie. The idea of having my own place that I didn't have to pay for, that sweetened the deal that was being offered. Now, I wasn't exactly young, although at the time I looked younger than 30. And although I wasn't exactly naive, I was still starstruck during those years, being somewhat new to LA and all. But I had had enough life experience to be somewhat guarded. So I just listened, and I considered it with full-on excitement, hoping he could not read my poker face. As hospitable as he was portraying himself to be with the little nuggets he was dropping, I knew I was on the other side of the negotiation, and he was the one pitching the deal. There's a fine balance in trying to play it cool without being aloof. As we continued eating our meal, we talked a little more business, such as me sharing that I had already been through a couple of record deals, and I handed him a demo of some of my previously recorded songs that I had co-written. When we finished, we walked to my car, we wished each other well, and I told him I would get back to him soon as we left our meeting. When I got home, I called one of my previous music producers and asked if he had had any entertainment lawyers he could recommend, and he gave me the names of McLean and Wong. I called them asking if they had any room to take me on as their client with the possible forthcoming negotiation between myself and the Warner Brothers subsidiary contract with Albie Shore, and they said yes. I called Al the next day. He picked up, and within no time, he was whisking me off for a makeover. He took me shopping, which I'm going to say it felt very uncomfortable for me. I grew up thinking that hard work always paid off. And because I thought this way, it was hard for me to be able to receive nice things from someone I had just met. I mean, sure, I knew him from radio and television, but I didn't really know this guy. And I hadn't done anything to prove myself to him yet. I didn't want to feel obligated to anybody. And although I didn't think of this being anything but business, nothing had been signed on a dotted line, let alone there even being a contract in hand at this point. He just seemed to be a trustworthy guy. So once he got me all gussied up, he called his financial advisors, and they picked us up from where we had been shopping. Believe me when I say they and their car looked the part. Like I said, he seemed trustworthy. But I didn't know these people. It was all happening so fast, and I was just along for the ride. I didn't feel scared. I felt pretty much in control. But without going off on a tangent here for a minute, what in the hell was I thinking? I didn't know these people. Looking back on it, it's kind of scary. Scenarios like this have gotten a lot of women in trouble, but that'll be another episode. Anyway, they picked us up and took us to the Four Seasons Hotel in Beverly Hills. Al took me out on the patio to meet, I want to say, 8 to 10 executives from a very well-known hair company that I remembered to be made famous by the international icon Farrah Fawcett. Yes, we're talking about hair again. He wanted to introduce me to the Wella Company. They were getting ready to revamp their products with a new Wella campaign, and he wanted me to be the face of it. It was very intimidating because he had me get up in front of these executives to sing a song a cappella. That was when I felt like, oh, okay, so here it is. I was put on the spot. And I thought to myself, well, just sing what you sang in front of him at the restaurant. Because you got big dreams? You want fame? Well, fame costs. And right here is where you start paying in sweat. And I did. And it was uncomfortable. It's not like when I was 3 and my mom told me to sing for grandma. I was singing for adults. I didn't know any of these adults on this high-end Beverly Hills hotel patio. And I was an adult. I wasn't in performance mode, so I had to turn it on real quick. But I did it. I became a wind-up doll in that moment. Everyone seemed to enjoy my performance. They shook my hand, and again, we were off. We were literally in and out of there in a hot second. I'm not joking. His financial advisors swung by and picked us up again at the valet. And we were in the car. Al said he had someone else he'd like for me to meet, but he needed to make a phone call. He did so. As we were already on our way to the next meeting, I could obviously hear Al's end of the conversation as he was talking me up to this guy on the other end of the phone. So that guy told Al to bring me on over, and off we went to meet this mystery man in Santa Monica. As we walked into this man's office building, I was told that this individual that I was about to meet was one of the biggest music publishers worldwide. And when we walked through the door, I was introduced to this man that had a very extensive and impressive resume. Al wanted me to have access to some of the greatest songs ever written. But that wasn't all. Besides producing music for and music supervising several feature films such as Cocoon, Running Scared, Black Rain, Flatliners, and Weekend at Bernie's, this global wonder had also overseen films for cable, miniseries, and movies made for television. So he and Al had also discussed my taking a look at a script for a lead that had supposedly been pitched to Britney Spears. This man's name that I speak of was Richard Rudolph. He was kind and warm and welcoming. I had not heard of his name before that meeting, and maybe some of you out there listening have not heard of him either. but a few of his family members might ring a bell. One being his daughter that you may have seen on some of your favorite episodes of Saturday Night Live, American actress and comedian Maya Rudolph. As a matter of fact, Richard's career as a record producer really began when he and Stevie Wonder collaborated on producing Maya's mother, Minnie Riperton's second album, Perfect Angel, which included a #1 song that has turned out to be one of the most performed songs of all time, Lovin' You. You know which one I'm talking about. Loving you is easy 'cause you're beautiful. Do 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 do. Ah, nothing. We got nothing. There's a reason I don't sing that song live, and it's not just because I'd been sick. What you just witnessed is the reason. And if Al had heard my rendition of Lovin' You, I probably wouldn't have had the introduction. But Richard Rudolph was the guy Al took me to see in regard to publishing. Richard has written well over 500 songs in the course of his songwriting career. His many production and writing credits included recordings by Stevie Wonder, who I already mentioned, Tina Marie, The Manhattan Transfer, The Temptations, Patty Austin, Timothy B. Schmidt, and Shaka Khan, just to name a few. Like I said, pretty impressive. Our meeting lasted for about an hour, and then we went on our merry little way. We had packed a lot in just one day, so don't let anyone tell you that a lot can't happen, because it can. It felt like a whirlwind of ease. Was this legit? Was this how it was supposed to work? Because I had been through a couple of record deals already, and things had never moved that fast. Well, don't get too excited because the next few months were like pulling teeth. But I was a very patient person. I would call Al to keep him posted on my end, and vice versa. I would call my lawyers, and they would tell me that everything was being negotiated. Finally, 6 months later, I get a call from Al that the contract is ready to be signed. He asks if there was some place near me where we could meet. We decided on Gordon Biersch in Burbank, which was not more than a half a mile up from where I had lived at the time. And we met that evening for dinner. He brought the contract, but before handing it to me, we celebrated. We broke bread together and cheered a few drinks to the new venture. We had gotten to know each other on a more personal basis during our phone conversations. However, that night felt a little bit more loose as we got a little bit more intoxicated and we talked as friends. I asked him about his life in the industry, and he told me of some of his stories and about some of the people that he had met along the way. He mentioned his ex, Kimberly Porter, and then we started talking about relationships. Now, a few months earlier, he had asked me in a roundabout way if I was involved with anyone. That's kind of normal, in our industry. They want to know how to market you. Um, Entertainers are more marketable if they're single, especially if you're a woman. So I didn't think anything of it at the time. I did tell him I had a boyfriend, but that night when we got together for dinner and drinks, he brought it up again. And I believe my relationship was on the rocks right around that time. Al then proceeded to tell me that he thought I was the marrying kind. He wondered why I wasn't married. And we kicked around some thoughts on that. I didn't feel like he was really sweet talking me, but he was very complimentary. I I felt like he was being sincere. But in the case that he was testing the waters, I was still coherent enough to be able to tell him that I was flattered, but I had learned my lesson in blurring the lines of business with pleasure, and that I didn't think it was a good idea to pursue anything beyond business and friendship at this juncture. And don't get me wrong, I found Al to be a very attractive man. I just wasn't attracted to him. He understood, at least that's what I thought, and we did a few more shots in celebratory fashion. We were having a good time. I excused myself to the ladies' room before we left, and upon my return, I was like, dude, you are not driving home like this. Because we had had a little too much. I said, you can stay at my place. Well, I wasn't wanting to give him the wrong idea. I said, I have a pull-out couch and you can sleep there. And so he did. Once we got him settled, I went upstairs, knocked on my roommate's door to tell her that Albie Shore was sleeping on the pull-out couch downstairs due to us tying one on, and she said, okay. I wished her a good night, went to my room, and I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up, and after peeing and brushing my teeth, I went downstairs to check on him. The couch had been folded up, and I turned to find a note on the entry table. It read, call me when you wake up. So I did. He picked up, and we were both feeling as if maybe we had kicked back a little too much on Grandma's cough syrup, if you know what I mean. He suggested that we get together and just kick back for the day. I was like, well, what do you have in mind? And he said, just lay around and watch some movies. I was in. So we decided that he would again come over to my place. My roommate came downstairs and I filled her in on the haps while she was eating breakfast. My stomach was currently not able to handle anything, so I was just taking it easy. I didn't want to impose on my shared space between my roommate and I, since his visits had not been discussed beforehand. But this is probably where the lines once again were blurred, and I have to own my part in this. Even though I told him that I wanted to keep it professional and that I did not want a relationship beyond friendship, when he got there, we went up to my bedroom to watch TV. In that moment, I didn't really think anything of it because I'd had many friendships with dudes, and those friends and I had hung out, Netflixing and chilling, way before Netflix was ever a thing. My room was tiny, so yeah, we were lying in bed together. We were comfortable. I was in my pajamas, and I think he had warm-up pants or something like that on. We were fully clothed, and there was absolutely no physical contact. We talked a little during commercials, but that was it. We were hungover. Maybe an hour or two in, I started to get hungry. I got up, grabbed some clothes, and excused myself to the bathroom. When I came out, my roommate had made her way from downstairs to her room and stood in her doorway to motion me into her room. So there I went. And she told me to come in and close the door. She proceeded to ask me if something was going on. And I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, when I came upstairs, I couldn't help but to see into your room. She said that Al was naked and in my bed. I closed my eyes and dropped my head because I thought, oh, great. How am I going to get out of this one? I took a deep breath, told her nothing was going on and that I guess I was going to have to go take care of it. Well, when I walked back towards my room, sure enough, the door was still open. His pants were on the end of the bed, and he was under my covers. Was he fully naked? I couldn't tell. But because I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, I nonchalantly said, hey, I'm hungry. I'm going to run to McDonald's. Do you want anything? He said no. And I said, okay, I'll be back soon. So I went to McDonald's, grabbed my food, and when I got back, he was nowhere to be seen. I tried calling him to see if he was okay, but no answer. What originally felt like a lazy Saturday suddenly felt heavy. There was no note left this time, and I remember my heart sinking because my gut told me that there probably would be no deal. But I hadn't given up complete hope. It might have felt like a lazy Saturday turned heavy, but I knew that Sunday was on the way. Well, Sunday passed, and on Monday, still no word from Al. I refused to stay stuck on the weekend's downturn. A lot of fun and goodness had come out of it, and maybe I was just being paranoid. I called my attorneys to see if they had received the contract or if I needed to fax it, because I wanted them to take another peruse before I signed the final cut. I want to say a week went by, and I had not heard from Al. I tried calling again, and not only was there no word, all of the numbers Al had given me were no longer working. I called my attorneys. They told me that they could not get in touch with Al, nor with any of his contacts either. They also told me the following. It's standard for a record label to take out an insurance policy on an artist in the case something happens that prevents the artist from working, such as an injury or death. The label can then recoup the monies given, right? Well, they said something was a little off, considering the exorbitant amount of money that had been taken out on me. In other words, it appeared that someone might want to hurt me in some way in order to recoup monies. They didn't want to jump to any conclusions, but they advised that I probably wouldn't want to sign this contract anyway. And that was that. That was all I needed to hear. It was shocking because I thought I had gained a friend. I thought I had gained a new business partner. I thought somebody besides my family believed in me. And maybe he did. I don't know that I ever really came to a resolve on how I felt about it. I am, however, very sure that it was the beginning of me going down some very deep and dark rabbit holes. And something else that I was sure of is that somebody was looking out for me. But that weekend that he gave me the contract, that weekend that we celebrated, it wouldn't be the last time I saw Albert. For most of my adult life, for exercise, I have been a runner. And I used to run every day up around Lake Hollywood. And one day, a few years later, countering my run was none other than Albert Brown. We stopped to have some small talk. There was nothing uncomfortable about it. It was like a couple of old acquaintances catching up for a minute. But that was it. And that was the last time I saw him, in person, 20-something years ago. But something has happened in the last few years that has brought all of my swirling questions back, front and center. And I couldn't help but to start connecting some dots on this unsolved mystery of mine. It involves a very high-profile court case that brings Albie Shore, otherwise known as Albert Joseph Brown III, back into the spotlight. But we'll have to do a little digging by giving you the backstory on Albert's rise to fame as Albie Shore, and a particular intern who came up behind him at Uptown Records before founding his own record label, only to become one of the biggest record executives in music history. That intern was none other than Sean Diddy Combs. The deep dive is rather lengthy, so if you're still interested in helping me come up with any conclusions, you'll just have to tune in to the next episode and join me right here on the Proxy Principle.
The Proxy Principle.